My name is Molly. I'm a pastry chef. My husband, Andy, and I got married 3 years ago. His family is very famous. They run a group of restaurants that everyone knows. They mainly deal with seasonings, which I use daily. I first learned about them when I went to visit my parents-in-law's house for the first time. I was hesitant to marry into such a respectful family. After all, my husband is the eldest son of the family and has been nominated to be the head of the family. In other words, I will be the wife of the head of the family. Perhaps my anxiety was showing, but my husband said to me, "Don't worry, I will protect you no matter what." He said that and held my hand tightly. However, my mother-in-law seemed to have a very different personality from my husband. Raised by my father, I was a disgrace to the family. With my family background status below on her own, I was an insignificant person who deserved to be ignored. Even if you have a son, he won't be the next heir. That's what she told me as soon as we met. The first meeting was the worst, but I didn't see my mother-in-law that much, so I've only had a few instances of what you might call marriage bullying. But a turning point came. My cake was chosen for the menu of a restaurant owned by my father-in-law. My mother-in-law was very proud of her cake, but it didn't make it past the first round of review. "I don't care since I didn't put my full effort into it," she said, "so even though I didn't say anything, I wonder if she thinks she could actually beat me, a pastry chef, if she really tried." But after that, she must have felt very bad about losing to a simple pastry woman. Her bullying escalated. She used to visit our house only once a month, but she started visiting us frequently and began to make sarcastic comments. "Molly, there's a hair on the floor. I wonder what kind of discipline you received to be satisfied with this kind of cleaning. I'd like to see your parents' faces." My mother-in-law started looking for something wrong as soon as she'd arrived and pointed out loudly. "I did that. If you want to complain, just tell me." My husband responded with a disgusted look on his face. My husband works from home and has taken the initiative in doing the housework himself because he has time to spare. "Mom, if you look in the mirror, you'll see his parents' faces." I wanted to tell her, "Molly, did you force your husband to do the housework again? I can't believe you put work first and neglect the housework. I didn't cut corners at all either at work or at home." She would change the subject and attack me. Even when my husband tried to stop her, she would yell until I apologized. I had no choice but to bow to her, and she would smile with satisfaction and walk away. My husband always sighed at my mother-in-law's attitude. "I'm sorry. It's because I put work first." "No, I'm sorry. I'm not reliable." A big thing about telling this to her. My husband tried to warn him every time, but my mother-in-law wouldn't listen to him. Probably the only person my mother-in-law listens to is my father-in-law. Well, I just have to put up with my mother-in-law's back sarcasm. If you just let it slide, it will go away in time. But I would soon learn that such naive thinking would not work with my mother-in-law. I never imagined that she would do something like that. It was June. A birthday party was being held through my husband's cousin. A big celebration was planned, to my surprise. They were going to invite people from work besides their relatives. The party was to be held in the hall of a luxury hotel that could accommodate about 100 people. Well, from my husband's family, this is probably not a big deal. Besides, I hear that his cousin is quite beautiful. There must be quite a few men who like to get close to her on this occasion. A few days after my husband informed me of this, I received a call from my mother-in-law. "The main dish is to be made by the family. Decide who will make what." "I see. So here's my suggestion, Molly. You're a pastry chef, so you must be good at cooking. The thing we had before, it was delicious, so why don't you cook that main dish? We'll pay for it, so you don't have to worry about the money." The way my mother said it sounded sarcastic, but it's true that I'm good at cooking in general. Well, the best is cakes, and my mother-in-law has never criticized me for cooking. It's the only genre that my mother-in-law never complains about. You know how to bake, so do it right. All right, I won't forgive you if there's any mistake." Before I could respond, my mother-in-law concluded on her own and hung up the phone. I gave up and adjusted my work schedule until the day of the party and started preparing for the cake and the pastry food. Everything went smoothly until the day of the celebration. My mother-in-law must have thought it was very important because she didn't bother me this time, but I now realize that it was just silence before the storm. On the day of the birthday party, I received a call from my mother-in-law. The time was 10:30 in the morning. The party starts at 12, so my mother-in-law, who is in charge of the event, must be busy making a final confirmation of the venue. I wondered what she wanted, but ignoring the call was too much trouble, so I decided to answer the phone. "Oh, Molly, I checked the food. I can't believe you're going to serve that trash. I'm sorry, but I threw it all away." I couldn't understand what was going on, so I just replied with an indifferent, "Oh, I see." "Excuse me, I'm at work right now. I was in the middle of rushing to get some urgent work done in time for the celebration. I didn't have time to listen to my mother-in-law's nonsense. I told you I threw away all your food. We don't have time. We are starting at 12. Get on and cook it over." I don't understand. Could it be that my mother-in-law doesn't know that I switched my responsibilities today? Yes, I had family members take my responsibility except the cake in order to take care of an urgent request. My cake was scheduled to be delivered an hour before the event started, so the cake at the venue, at least, was not prepared by me. Of course, my mother-in-law doesn't know that. So, to harass me, she threw away all the dishes and is trying to make me make them over again. There's no way a big cake can be made in a few hours to begin with. I guess she wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. I had no choice but to tell her everything because if I didn't, it would cause a lot of trouble for my husband's relatives. "Mother, please listen to me carefully. I'm in the kitchen. I've been here since this morning. I've been baking a cake to fulfill an urgent order. That's why I'm not in charge of the main dishes. The main cake was to be delivered later," I said slowly and gently as if I was talking to a child. "You're lying. How could that be?" Finally realizing what was happening, my mother-in-law began to panic. "What are you going to do?" "We don't have much time left before we start. You have to do something. It's your fault for not telling me, or else I'm going to say that you threw it away." My mother-in-law was talking crazy things, but it would ruin my reputation as a pastry chef if she blurted out that I threw away the food. I had no choice but to leave the urgent work to my staff and rush to the venue. But there was a traffic jam, and it was a little after 11 o'clock when I arrived at the venue. I had called my husband and explained the situation to him, so when he saw me, he came rushing up to me with a pale face. Apparently, the food didn't make it in time. The food was in the waiting room, but the main dish was missing. So I went to the kitchen, and there was a sink full of food, and then I walked in. It was like a funeral. Some people were even saying that they had no choice but to cancel the birthday party. My mother-in-law, in dire straits, said, "Oh, he threw it away." Of course, she did. As soon as she saw me, she treated me like a culprit. I could see this coming, so that I had made a request to my husband. I'm sick and tired of dealing with my mother-in-law. "I'm going to put an end to all this today," Molly declared abruptly. "Molly, what have you done? You're such a terrible person for interrupting someone's celebration," she yelled at me. My husband's relatives, who had heard the commotion, were all around, and they all turned on me at once. "I believe in what she said, but I didn't throw away the food," I corrected. My mother-in-law was quick to say, "Who else but you? How dare you ruin this celebration? I can only think of you brought up by a single parent," she continued. "I was at work all morning. I'm sure our staff can attest to me. And your mother was the one who told me that you'd thrown away all the food, wasn't it?" I retorted. "I would never say that. That's why single-parent children. I wonder what kind of education we received to put blame on others. I reasoned. My mother-in-law became a tragic heroine, appealing to everyone around her that she was the victim. My mother-in-law, who had been in the family for more than 20 years, was more trusted by the relatives than me, who has only been a member of the family for a few years. I could feel the reports focused on me even more. "Well, I guess we should check the security cameras in my store. I'm sure I can prove my alibi," I suggested. Then would be clear that my mother-in-law was lying. I was determined to fight back, but I asked Mooley to do my work. I went directly to Molly's workplace, I explained. The voice was my father-in-law's. I asked my husband to call my father-in-law. He is a busy man, so there was a good chance he could refuse. But my father-in-law seemed to agree. My husband is relieved that he succeeded in his mission. Because of my father-in-law's words, the suspicion that had been directed at me began to focus on my mother-in-law. "So, Molly, I'd like to hear more about what you said about the phone call earlier," I urged. "She tasted the food, and because it was like trash according to her, she just threw everything away," Molly recounted. "She told me to make it over again, and then I started playing the audio I had secretly recorded. Now, how about this? Do you still believe her?" I challenged. When I asked this question, my relatives began to apologize to me. Then I heard a voice crying out from among them. It was my cousin Sarah. In fact, Sarah was the one who took over cooking for me in order for me to deal with the request that had come in on short notice. She graciously agreed to cook for me because I seemed to be busy. Sarah and I have always been good friends. I told her how to cook, so I trusted her with the cooking. I never thought this would happen. I can't believe she threw away the food I worked so hard on, and it was just to put blame on Molly. So terrible. Sarah lamented, tears streaming down her face. Was Sarah's dish that bad? When I was asked to taste it, it was excellent, I interjected. No, I didn't mean it that way," Sarah stammered, trying to clarify. "Don't give me those excuses, you fool." My father-in-law yelled at her, and she slumped to the floor. My mother-in-law apologized and apologized to my father-in-law, but he wouldn't listen to her. Besides, my mother-in-law has other people to apologize to. "Mother, I think you need to apologize to someone else. Even if Sarah's cooking was that bad, it's terrible to throw it away," I suggested. When I sat there, my mother-in-law's face turned angry, and she glared at me. She was a fool not to realize that rebellion is photo. "I threw it away because I thought it was your food. I didn't want a single-parent woman like you cooking because I thought it was disgusting and despicable. It would be a disgrace to serve such food to everyone, so I kindly tossed it away. You should be grateful." My mother-in-law spat and screamed at me, astonishing everyone with her words. It was my husband's aunt who raised her voice next. "Annie, a single parent is despicable, huh? You know I'm divorced, and did you forget that father was raised by a single parent?" My mother-in-law was taken aback by the cold look in her eyes. Before she knew it, her relatives were looking at her in the same way. "Oh no, you're a single parent of the highest rank, Molly. From a single parent of the lowest rank. That's why she's despicable," they echoed. "Just like houses, there are different ranks of single parents, apparently. I didn't know that," I remarked. "Stop talking," yelled my father-in-law. My mother-in-law shivered and sat down on the cold kitchen floor. I heard it was a celebration, but what's the worst going on? Suddenly, a dignified old man's voice called out. He was my husband's grandfather and the current head of the family. "I don't know what's going on, but I can't forgive her for throwing away the food," he stated, glaring at my mother-in-law. It's beneath a person to disrespect food. As a child, I was often told to respect food. There is a soul in every grain of rice. There is a salt in every dish, not only of the food itself, but also of the cook. In other words, you have thrown away the soul, he lectured. Is there no one else in my family who would be so ungrateful? He asked my father-in-law. Of course not. We don't need such an ungrateful person in our family. I'm divorcing her tomorrow," my father-in-law declared, satisfied with his answer. The word of the head of the family was absolute. Everyone understood the weight of these words, especially my mother-in-law, who was proud to be the next head of the family. She went around apologizing to all the relatives for ruining the celebration and throwing away the dish. Some relatives even shouted at her for abuse. As for the division of property, they agreed to provide a small amount of money. My mother-in-law was evicted from the house and had to live in a cheap apartment. Now she works part-time, and her boss, who is younger than her, gets mad at her every day. Now that I'm free from the stress of my mother-in-law, my work is going very well, and several of my cakes are now on the menu of my father-in-law's restaurant. They were so delicious that I ate too many and gained weight. A few months later, my belly got as big as my father-in-law's. I didn't overeat. I was pregnant, I admitted. I want to keep this happiness for the sake of my future child and my husband. With this vow, I continue to bake cakes to bring smiles to the faces of my customers.